Chapter 8, Casper, the Competition. "I'm not sure this is your best idea," Casper said in a low voice to the cloaked figure between him and Nolan. As the evening light dimmed, they had snuck back down Mount Shadow and entered the tournament camp. Nolan, as Prince of Marshwood, was greeted by many people paying their respects. A few recognized Casper and welcomed him as Nolan's friend. Fortunately, no one seemed to pay much mind to their shorter companion wearing a cloak and wide hood. But Casper was certain someone would recognize Littagale through her disguise and spoil their adventure at any moment. She pulled the hood of her cloak to wink at Casper. So far, so good. To help disguise Littagale, Nolan had rubbed dirt all over her face, although even he admitted afterwards that wasn't a great disguise. She also wore men's pants and a tunic, which Casper thought was at least a little better. "She's pretty even covered in mud," thought Casper with a blush. "Besides," added Littagale, "I can't stay in Tor's lair while he's gone. What if a prince came to rescue me? Without my dragon to defend me, I'd be stuck with the guy." "She's right about that," thought Casper with a scowl. They entered the main section of the tournament camp, and Nolan whistled in surprise. "Well, get a load of this." Everywhere they looked, the tournament camp had turned into an even greater bustle of excitement than usual. Torches lined the dirt road leading through the camp. Kids ran around pulling streamers and waving sparklers. Townswomen stood gossiping about the attractiveness of various princes. Townsmen walked around critiquing the prince's horses and judging the quality of their weapons. The prince's squires and knights, and even some royal families had joined the camp, and the population of Marshwood had probably tripled in a single day. Littagale looked this way and that from under her hood. She said quietly. "It's a bit like attending one's own funeral. A very happy, party-like funeral." "They're just excited," said Nolan. "Your dragon napping is the most interesting thing to happen to Marshwood for a long time. The danger you're supposedly in makes it that much more intriguing. No offense." "None taken," she laughed. It indeed appeared the townspeople were over the shock of Littagale's kidnapping, and now they were turning lemons to lemonade. Signs and banners along the road suggested the locals were taking bets on which prince would succeed in rescuing the princess. Street vendors filled the air with calls about their wares. The smell of popcorn and sweets wafted through the air. A few townspeople had stands along the road selling jewelry and flowers, and farmers sold goods to hungry tourists. Nolan stopped at a road stand and bought 3 ears of cooked corn from a farmer. He handed one to each of his friends and bit into his own. That's good." Casper bit into the seasoned corn cob and had to agree. "Hey," said Littagale, pointing ahead up the road. "Where's everyone going? Let's go see. I don't want to miss anything." The princess hurried to catch up with her as she led them onward. In the middle of the tournament camp rose the spectator stands and arenas of combat. This seemed to be where everyone was headed. The trio blended in with the crowds and quickly climbed up to open seats. Then they looked down on the torch-lit arenas. The arenas had been combined into one big arena. On one end, the townspeople had constructed a fake dragon. It was only about half the size of the real Tor and made of green-painted wood with sheets for wings. Casper saw a pair of men lying inside the head of the fake dragon, and they were using a set of bellows to blow gold and yellow streamers out the dragon's mouth. Littagale giggled. "Tor would destroy this thing if he saw it." Nolan grinned. "I think it's a good resemblance." "Go, Deke!" cried a woman sitting in front of them. She stood and cheered with her friends. Casper heard Nolan groan. Entering the arena, Deke lifted his sword and acknowledged the crowds, who cheered him all the more. He twirled off his black cloak with a flourish and tossed it at his squire, who wasn't paying attention and ended up with the cloak wrapped around his face. Deke made a "what an idiot, huh?" face for the crowd and started climbing into his black armor. Another prince also entered the arena, this one not nearly as interested in the crowd's reaction. Never had there been a thinner face, on a thinner head, on a thinner neck, on a thinner body. He carried a javelin, and a long sheath was strapped to his back. His squire held his armor at the ready, and Casper saw the armor was the bright yellow of the kingdom of Bowenship. "Riddick," said Casper and Nolan simultaneously. "Oh," said Littagale. She chewed her corn on the cob and frowned slightly. "He's not so bad. I'll have to ask Tor not to hurt him." Casper frowned at this. "I don't want Riddick fried either," he thought, "but it's a weird kind of jealousy when you wouldn't mind seeing someone singed." By now both competing princes were dressed in their armor, wielding their weapons of choice. The crowd hushed in anticipation. The tournament announcer stood in the center of the arena. He shouted into a bullhorn, "Our first contest is between Prince Riddick Bowenship and Prince Deke Archwild." The crowd cheered. "Ready? The announcer hurried out of the arena to clear the space between the fake dragon and the princes. Attack! The crowd rose to their feet and cheered as the two princes raced across the arena toward the dragon. Swept up in the excitement, Caspar, Nolan, and Littagale joined in and cheered for Riddick. They watched as Deke lifted his sword over his head and charged. Riddick stopped a farther distance from the wooden dragon and lifted his javelin. Deke easily got to the dragon first, but for some reason he only made a few slashes with his sword into the leg of the wooden monster. Then he actually stopped and glanced back at Riddick. "What's Deke doing?" Caspar asked aloud. Riddick by this time had thrown his javelin, and the pointed weapon flew true and struck right in the dragon's wooden chest. The men inside the dummy dragon poured a bucket of green goo out the dragon's mouth, presumably meant to be blood, since no one had killed a dragon in so long that none really knew its blood type, and the men roared out fake dragon cries of pain. "Your winner is Riddick Bowenship," shouted the announcer with the bullhorn. Half the crowd cheered while the other half sighed in disappointment for Deke. Riddick took off his helmet and bowed to the crowd. Deke rested his helmet under one arm, came over to congratulate Riddick, and waved to the crowd with those big white teeth of his. "Something smells rotten in Archwild," thought Caspar as he watched Deke suspiciously. Suddenly, a great roar filled the air. This was not from the wooden dragon. The crowd forgot the competition and scanned the dark sky for any sign of the real thing. The three friends looked at each other. "He's back," said Littagale. She pulled her hood to cover her face better, but she scanned the sky like everyone else. A woman in the stands pointed with a scream. Sure enough, Tor's long, dark body shot across the sky. He came from the direction of the sea and was aimed straight for Mount Shadow. Then they heard another sound, a woman's scream, from the dragon's clutches. "She has another princess!" cried a townsman. "Sophia," thought Caspar with worry as he watched Tor fly overhead. "I hope she's okay." "We need to get back," he told his friends. Nolan and Littagale agreed and started their way off the spectator stands. The announcer's voice over the bullhorn caught everyone's attention. "As winner of this first dragon fighting trial," he shouted, "Prince Riddick has won the honor of being the first to challenge Tor the Intolerant. Hurry, Prince! You may be able to reach the dragon's lair and save Littagale before the dragon returns." Everyone snapped into action at once, and Caspar struggled to get through the excited crowd. He caught up with his friends in the less busy road, and Nolan was looking right and left, trying to decide which way to go. "What are you doing?" Caspar shouted over the commotion. He pointed the way they'd come. "We have to go, now." Littagale clutched her cloak beside him and waited for her brother. "Nolan, Aha!" Nolan ran over to where a horse and cart were hitched to a post. Quickly, he backed the horse and cart into the road. "Climb on!" Exchanging a look, Caspar and Littagale shrugged and ran to climb into the cart. Nolan grabbed the reins and slapped them against the horse to get it going. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people in the road. A few other horses were also in their way. Another cart suddenly pulled onto the road right in front of them and plodded along at a speed not at all to Nolan's satisfaction. "Are you kidding me?" Nolan shouted. He pulled up their horse so they didn't slam into the other cart. Caspar jostled, but looked to see a "My child is an honor student at Archwild Charm School" sign on the back of the cart. Nolan shook his fist at the cart and yelled nonsensically, "The war is over, Archwild!" Then he pulled the reins and steered their horse around the other cart before speeding onward. Caspar sank back into the cart with Littagale, and their bumpy ride continued down the road and out of the camp. Their pace quickened once on the open road, and they raced across the field toward the forest that rose up to the mountains and Mount Shadow. "Look!" Littagale pointed back. Caspar turned and saw the torch-lit camp behind them. A lone horse was charging through the edge of the camp, also headed for Mount Shadow. Its rider carried a torch, and the torchlight reflected off of yellow armor. "Riddick Bowenship," thought Caspar. "Nolan," he called forward, "we'd better hurry it up." "We're almost there," his friend called back. Sure enough, the edge of the forest was just ahead. Nolan pulled the reins to bring their horse to a stop, and Littagale fell into Caspar as the cart came to a rest. They quickly tumbled out of the cart and stood on shaky legs. Nolan was unhitching the horse from the cart. "Thanks, mate. Anything you can do to stall the guy behind us would be much appreciated." Caspar didn't even question it when the horse nodded in response and trotted back to intercept Riddick. He watched as the cart horse flat-out charged the Princess Stallion, and the purebred horse was thrown off his game and jumped to the side in surprise. The cart horse kept chasing the stallion around the field, and Riddick seemed to be having a hard time getting the stallion back on track and away from the smaller horse, who appeared to be having the time of its life. This way, Casper told Littagale. He led their run up the forest trail. He and Nolan had gone at a much slower pace earlier that morning, and it was considerably more difficult in the dark. Now, only patches of moonlight illuminated the forest, and Casper tripped over his footing more than once. They also hadn't been running uphill this morning, and Casper found himself winded by the time he saw the rocks of the higher mountainside ahead. Here, panted Littagale as she stepped around Casper. Sure enough, there was the crevice entrance to Tor's lair. Casper led the way inside, and quickly they ran through the dark passage until they entered the wider cavern. Tor had restarted the fire in the princess cave, and the flickering light shone strange shadows on the wall as the giant dragon stepped away from where he'd deposited Sophia on the floor. Sophia screamed. Casper ran around the dragon to find his sister backed against the far cavern wall, staring wide-eyed at the dragon. She didn't look harmed, only her defendal purple dress was a little dirty. Her black hair, wind-disheveled from the long ride, spread like a poof all around her head. "Sophia," Casper called. Her big brown eyes left the dragon and focused on Casper in surprise. "Casper? What are you?" Littagale and Nolan ran up behind Casper. "Wesick is right behind us," said Littagale quickly. "We have to hide. Quick." Casper nodded and hurried to his sister. In a whisper, he said, "I'll explain everything, but right now we have to be quiet and hide in the kitchen." "Kitchen?" She made a confused face. Casper quickly took her hand and pulled her with them into the princess cave. They shushed each other nervously and hurried into the kitchen. Casper set his sister in a chair at the table, gave her a reassuring kiss on the top of her head, and then turned with Littagale and Nolan to listen. All the jostling left him closest to the doorway, so he peeked around to get a look. Out in the cavern, Tor was clearing his throat and getting into position in front of the mountainside crevice. He hopped around like a boxer before a match and appeared to be enjoying himself. Then they heard the rattling of armor. Prince Wesick appeared a moment later, brandishing his javelin. His helmet tilted up to see the dragon, and he jumped back against the wall in surprise. Just as he'd done with Nolan and Casper, Tor rose on his hind legs and roared,
"Who dares enter the lair of Tor the Intolerant?"
Wesick called out bravely, "It is I, Prince Wesick of Bowenship. I've come to rescue the princess." Tor opened his mouth to speak, but then he paused and flicked his ears uncertainly.
Which one?"
He remained up on his hind legs, but didn't attack just yet. Wesick shuffled against the wall, as if also uncertain. "Well, let me think. Who is the other princess you just captured?"
"Princess Sophia of Defendal."
Tor sounded as if he was brokering some kind of deal. "Oh." Wesick paused and thought again. "Well, her brother inherited Defendal, right?"
"I believe that was a line of succession, yes."
"Oh," Wesick said again. He brandished his javelin. "Then I'm here for Littagale, heir of the Marshwood throne." Behind Casper, Littagale murmured, "Why, that little creep." Tor paused a moment, and Casper saw his lime-green eyes swing in their direction. But when Casper looked back at Littagale, he saw her cross her arms and lean against the wall, fuming at the unchivalrous prince. She clearly wasn't going to step in and save Wesick the way she'd saved Nolan and Casper. Casper couldn't help but grin. Back in the cavern, Wesick shouted, "Release the princess, foul beast, or meet thy end!" With a loud war cry, the prince hefted his javelin and threw it at Tor with all his strength. Unlike with a fake wooden dragon, however, here the javelin didn't make much of an impact. It struck Tor square in the chest scales and bounced off as if hitting an impenetrable wall. With a loud clatter, the javelin landed on the floor and rolled away with an embarrassingly slow pause of action. Tor looked down at his chest and then at the yellow-armored prince. Exposing fangs, he said,
"My turn."
The dragon stretched his neck, inhaled, and opened his mouth in the prince's direction. An incredible burst of fire erupted from the dragon's mouth, and the sudden heat caused Casper to pull his head back around the corner for protection. When he looked back, Wesick was crying, "Ow! Ow! Ow!" and dancing around the cavern, pulling off his superheated armor. He was soon down to his underpants, and he held his bare arms and stared in fear up at the dragon. Tor spread his wings and roared an echoing blast. Casper and the others had to cover their ears, and they watched as Wesick fell on his backside. The half-naked prince scrambled to his feet, and he ran for the exit. A moment later he was gone, and Tor stopped his roar. When all was still, Tor started chuckling to himself. He drew his wings back in and let out a sigh.
"That does get the old blood pumping."
Littagale and Nolan stepped around Casper to re-enter the main cavern, and Casper quickly went back to the kitchen to check on his sister. She sat with a look of shock plastered on her pretty face, and Caspar gently reached down to touch her shoulder. "Come with me," he said gently. "Let's go out with the others, and we'll explain everything." Sophia looked up at him blankly, swallowed, and stood to be led back into the cavern. When Caspar let out his sister, Littagale gave Sophia a comforting smile. Nolan gave Caspar a look that said he hoped this was all a good idea. Tor looked down at Sophia with a fangy smile.
"Hi,"
said the dragon. Sophia looked up at him, then promptly fainted. Caspar caught her before she hit the floor, and Littagale and Nolan hurried over.
111 fainters.
Tor chuckled and turned away to curl up and sleep.